Hey, what's up coders, welcome back to my channel. In this video I'll be showing you how to use CustomPaint Widget in your Flutter application and also show you how to mix in some animations with it. This widget is really simple, intriguing, and at the same time it's fun to work with it because it involves a lot of shape, math, coordinate, offset values. Well, if you look at the example that I've chosen today, it's quite interesting. Well, I had a lot of UI planned for this topic, but then Google I/O 2019 transmission just caught my attention and I thought, let me come up with something similar to it, and I just tried it to see if it works, and it did. So I've tried my best to get something very similar to it, but definitely there is a lot of room for improvement. Also, I've not used any clippers in this video, so it's purely a custom paint with animation. So moving on to the demo section, first let me show you how the landscape animation works, and then I'll show you the portrait mode. So let me give a quick restart. So there you go, you can see that all of these icons have animations in it, and you could see that a simple animation. And similar way, let's see on the portrait mode also. There are two different files that I've used, and in a moment I'll explain as to why I've used two different files. Alright, let's see the portrait mode. There you go, so you could see that animation on the portrait mode also. Now the reason that I used two files was that you could see that the design is quite compact in the portrait and you have a lot of space in the landscape mode. So the offset value obviously differs in both these orientation. So just to give that difference, I have them in a separate file. Alright, so moving on to the implementation part, first let me explain you the structure of the files that I've used here so that it would be very easy for you to understand and how I've implemented it. So first thing is the main.dart file, which just has the material app and the theme, and it is routed to the home page. So if I click on the home page, it's a simple stateful widget, and you must have seen in most of my videos I have used this format where it has a scaffold and an app bar. That's it. But in the body section, it has something very interesting. Now this is the page where I decide or which UI has to be rendered depending on my orientation. So that condition is being checked here. First thing, I have defined a custom widget here. Now let's define the widget and check for the orientation. So to find the orientation, all you have to do is just use this line. Now this variable has the orientation value, and now we are checking if it is portrait or landscape mode. Now depending on the portrait or landscape, I'm returning a different UI. I wouldn't say a UI, this is another file which has the animation part involved, and it builds the custom paint. There you go. So we have done the checking section of the orientation, and as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I will be focusing only on the landscape mode. So let's click on this and see what is this file all about. In this file, we are going to define the animation, but as of now, first let's build the custom paint. Let us get the shapes on the screen and then we will add the animation. So to get the shapes, first thing we have to do is define our custom paint. So there you go. So we have defined our custom paint inside the padding. Custom paint widget allows you to draw things on the screen by making use of the custom painter object. Now this custom paint has three properties. In fact, one is the painter, child widget, and foreground painter. But in our use case, we are not going to use the child and foreground painter because there is no need for these two properties in my use case. So all we are doing is just using the painter. Now this is where all your painting happens, and that I have defined it in a separate file. So the first file checks, that's the home page, checks for the orientation, and after the orientation I have the logo animator landscape, which does the animation and builds the custom paint. And in my painter prop helps you to draw all the shapes on the screen. So we will see what are the properties involved in it. Alright, so this logo painter landscape is nothing but it's an instance of a class that extends a custom painter. And this one has two methods to be implemented. Now this class. Now let's see what are the methods that we have to implement. One is paint and another is should repaint. Now what this paint does is, this is the method that it creates your canvas the same as the size of your child parameter, and if the child is not defined inside it, then it determines the size that you provide in the custom paint object when instantiating it. So we will come to this paint in a minute. And there is also something called should repaint. Now it tells you, this function tells you whether if your widget needs to be repainted if there is any property changing. Say for example, if your painting depends on a variable and that variable changes, so it can either return a true or a false. So that Flutter knows that if it has to call this paint method to repaint your painting. If not, then just return false. So first let's see how to draw this first shape, which is a line, and then we will see how to draw the rectangular circle and how to get this particular shape. So we will start drawing one by one, and then we will see what are the properties involved in it and how to do it as well. First, let's concentrate on the painting object. So I'm going to define our constructor here. So the first thing is the constructor, which I have defined here, and it has the paint. And then I'm going to use a stroke cap, which is round, which is exactly the corner of your lines here. So this corner, if you want it flat, then you can just ignore this property and give a different one. So I'm using a stroke cap, round, square, whatever you want to define. So I'm going with a round. And then the last property is I'm going to give a stroke width, that is the width of your line, and in my case it's going to be 10. So these are the basic properties that I want to define. And then moving on to the paint. The paint is where you literally draw your shapes. Canvas. You have a canvas, and inside this, first we're going to use draw line. So let's see how to draw the line. And then I'm going to say draw line, and draw line has few properties that you have to define. So what is the first property? So the first property is the offset. Now offset has two values, one is x and y. So these are your points basically. So it's your first point and this is your second point. You need to have another offset. So this is your point 1 and this is your point 2. So I'm going to give a value and I'm going to show you on the emulator how it looks. So here I'm going to use, there you go, and after that you have to say paint, and that's when it would paint on the screen. Let's see how it works, and this is a lowercase value. So there you go, I have built this. So you can see that the first point is 25, so 25 is your x. So you have to consider this as like a coordinate. So this point is 0, 0, which is your x and y, and this is your height, which is y, and this is your x-axis, which is the width. So when I say 25 here, it's going to pick 25 of your x, so which would be here, and 100 of y. So this is your first point. Now moving on to the second point, I want it here. So my x will remain the same. So that's the reason you have 25. But my y is no more 100. In fact, it has increased and it would be 300. Say for example, if I give, instead of 300, if I give 200, you can see the difference. So this is the 200. So the line gets shortened. and there you go. You can. Now I need to draw another parallel line next to it. So here in my case, my x and y values, I mean these two values will remain same because it's just going to be parallel. Only my x value will differ because I'm going to draw it somewhere at this end. So I'm going to quickly add those points and show you how it looks as well. So there you go. So instead of, this was 25, so obviously this has to be a higher value than 25, so it's 100, and my y values remain the same for both the points. So that's how you can get these two lines. Now let's try to see how to get a horizontal line. Alright, so for the first one, what I've done is I need two horizontal lines. So I have used the first one as 1 and 150 and the second one as 120 and 150. So if you look at this, first you have to get this point and then draw a line to get this point. So that is what these two lines are. Now say for example, in case if you want more space in this, so that you want to push this a little more to the bottom, you can definitely work on these values. So let me show you how to do this. So here our x will remain the same, but the y is going to increase. So I'm going to put it to 250 and 250. There you go. So you can see you could play around with these values to get your desired design of your choice. So this is how you draw lines. Now next we will see how to draw a rectangle and a circle. So next I'm going to start with the rectangle. So I'm just going to give. Alright, so if you see here, it is nothing but left, top, width, height. So this is what you have to use and define the values here. I'm going to use the paint and I want a different color. So a paint dot color, and I'm going to use a custom color. And similarly, you have another property for the paint, which is the style, whether do you want it to be filled in or not. That is, if you want a stroke or a fill style painting. So I'm going to use painting style fill, so that you have the entire rectangular filled with a color. And then I'm going to say canvas. Then I'm going to say draw this on the canvas. And you're going to give the offset values, and then you got to say the paint object. So this is how you draw the rectangular. And if you look at the emulator, you can see the rectangular placed over here. Definitely you can play around with the x value, y values, and the width and height to get your desired position. Now I'm going to draw a circle which has to be exactly above this rectangle. So let me show you how to draw a circle. So to start with the circle, I'm going to give the offset values first, which is the top circle. It's just the naming convention. You can definitely give a different name. Here I'm going to give my x and y value. This is the x and y position, and for the radius of the circle you have a different property to define that. So as of now we will just give the x and y, and then let's give a custom color to it as we did it for the rect. And then we will give a style, which is again a fill. You can definitely give okay, I think I'm using it outside the paint function. Let me add it inside it. Okay, make sure all your painting has to be done inside the paint function. So here I'm giving a fill, and then what I'm doing is I'm drawing it inside the canvas. Now after defining the offset color properties, you have to use it inside the canvas. And then I'm going to say draw circle. Top circle, and my radius is 40, and then I'm going to use the paint. This is how simple it is to draw a circle, rectangular, or any other shapes. And now if I look at the emulator, you can see the shape with the fill color and the radius of 40. Well, I forgot to mention here I have used a circle, which is nothing but draw arc, and I'm going to show you how to do that as well, and then we will move on with these two shapes. So first thing is the draw arc. So for that I've used again the same color and style properties. So for this I have used circle rect, the offset and size property. So that's basically the width and height of the circle, and then these are the X and Y positions. Then I'm going to use canvas. The first thing, you have start angle, sweep angle, use center, paint. Now till this you will not be able to see this difference. When I add animations you can see that the angle values. So as of now I'm just going to use the values here, which is, now when I do this I should be able to see the red circle. Yeah, but you will not be able to see these values because the animation is still not applied on them. Then we will see how to work on the filled in yellow square and the other part of the square as well. This yellow rect is similar like the one that we did for the blue rect. So you could see that it's exactly the same. The only difference is the X and Y position. The width and height remains the same. Now I'm going to place another one with a custom clippings happening, but I'm not using a clippers here. I'm all using is a custom paint, and I'll show you how to do that. Now to do that custom part, what you have to do is first define path. After that, first thing I'm going to use path move to. Now this is the one that place your pen at this particular point. Now the point that I'm placing is 445 and 40. Now I'll tell you why am I using these points. Now this is that point. So from here I'm placing the point, and then I'm starting to draw those shapes, and then I come back to this point again. So I'm going to show you how I'm doing it. So first is this point. So I have placed my brush on this point, and then I'm going to draw a line to this point. Alright, so the first thing is you define the path. Then I say path move to 445 and 40. Now this is the point 445 and 40, and from there my X is decreased but my Y remains the same. So my X has decreased from 445 to 390, but the Y remains the same. So that's when you can draw this line. Then you need to go directly down to this point where my Y has increased and my X has decreased, because you could see this is 390, then obviously this would be 360. So that's what you see here, 360 and 100. And then from here you have to increase your X and your Y remains the same. So you're increasing the X and the Y remains the same. So when you do this, it gets closed, and then you fill the color and the style, and then you say canvas draw path underscore paint. When you do that, you get this. So this is how you draw custom shapes. And the last one that we're going to focus is the green and this rectangle. The rectangle is same as the path that I've used. The only difference is I have clipped it on the other side of the rectangle. So I'm going to show you how. I'm going to first add the values and then show you how it. So there you go. So I have added the circle first here. So it's a similar circle as this. And next I've added the rectangle, but it's not the similar rectangle that I've used like the draw rect, but instead I've used the path and line to properties. So all I've done is I've defined a new path, and then I start saying 535. So my X is, so here, so in this case I had started from this point, but in this case I'm starting from this point and then drawing this custom shape. So first, when you're using this path property, all you have to do is first target on move to. First get your brush or your paintbrush to the particular position, and then start moving down to whatever custom shape you want, and then you can use fill and then a canvas draw. Do not forget the canvas, because if you do not add this you will not see your shapes on the screen. So this is how you achieve different shapes using custom paint. This is just the shapes, but I've not added the animation. Now let's add the animation and see how it looks. Before that, I think I missed out the should repaint. This has to be false in our case. So let's quickly add that. Alright, so moving on to the animations, the painting was done in this particular file, which is the logo painter landscape.dart, and the animation is in a separate file just to make sure that we have everything separated and it's easy to read and debug as well. So for this, first thing you have to use is let's add with single ticker provider state mixin. So if you are very new to animation, please do watch my video. I have a video exclusively about the basics of animation, and I have explained in detail what all these properties are, so I'm not going to go through them. But in order to get the animations working, you have to give the single ticker provider state mixin. So the first thing. Next, what I've done is I have added the fraction values for each individual icons. I'm not using the same fraction value for everything. Animation value, I'm using an individual one. So for this one fraction, so that I have a kind of an control over each logo. If it was just one thing, then I could have had just one. So there are multiple icons and multiple animation, so I'm going to use multiple values here. So let me quickly add those values. So there you go. So I have defined one for the line 1, line 2, then the blue circle, green bar. So I've just given the names like that, and then later I have defined the animation value here. After this, we need a controller, which is very important. So we have our fraction values, we have our animation value, we have our controller. Now the next thing is we have to define our init and dispose state. So first let's start with the init state. Now what are we going to define inside the init state would be, first thing we're going to define the controller. And inside the controller we are going to define the duration, and I'm going to give a duration of 1000 milliseconds. Then I'm going to define individual animations, that is for the first animation, which is the line 1 animation. The line 1 animation is nothing but it is a tween value. I'm going to say it should start from here and end at this point and animate with the controller and listen for the state and update a particular fraction value. This is what I'm going to do. So let me write down the code and then walk through it again. Alright, so what I've done is I've defined my first animation of the line 1, and I say begin 100 and end at 150. Now this value could vary depending on your use case or your animation effect that you want to give. It could be begin from 0 to 1. Since I wanted, when I trigger that animation, I wanted the line to start from here and then drop down to this particular point. So I've given the same offset values, and then I pass the controller, and then I say listen for, then I add a listener, and then I say set state. So this, what happens is that whatever animation value you're getting, it's getting updated in my line 1 fraction, and then I pass this line 1 fraction to my painter object so that it gets repainted as and when the animation value gets updated. So I'll show you in a minute how to do that also. So let me define the other animations also, and then we will add those inside the constructor property of this painter. Animation values, and then we have to say the last thing that we need to mention here in the init state is we have to define a controller and then say forward. So you can add even the repeat mode, but in my case I'm just gonna say controller forward. And also it's very important to dispose your controller. People forget this, so let's dispose the controller by using the dispose method. So we are done defining our animation section. Now all you have to do is add these animated values inside your painter object. So these are the values that we have added. Now if you look into the painter landscape, we have to define those values. We have to retrieve those values. Now, in order to use this, you have to define those values here. So I'm going to say double. We have those fraction values from our animation and we have it in our painter. Now still this is not applied in our canvas because these all are static values. Now I want these fractions to be applied here. So what I do is I don't want it on my first two lines, which is these lines. I want the animations on the horizontal lines. So I'm gonna use, instead of 150, I'm going to use my line 1 fraction value. So this is my third line, so I'm going to use on these two lines, and similar way the line 2 fraction, instead of 250 I'm going to use these lines. So what happens, so the value will vary from, the line 2 will vary from 200 to 250. So in this range it will try to animate the values. So that's when you can see that animated effect. So similarly for my rectangular, I'm gonna use the blue circle fraction and use it on the height, because I don't want the width to be animated, I want the height to be animated. So for that I'm going to use this into circular radius, that is the top circle. So if you see this one, I want this to be animated. So for that I'm going to change the radius in this case and not the x and y. So for that I'm going to add the animated values on the radius of the circle. So similar way, I'm not going to do anything. So for the draw arc circle, I'm using it on the angle, which was, if you look at the properties, it says the start angle and the sweep angle. So I'm using the animation on the sweep angle by using the blue circle fraction values. So if you look at the blue fraction, it's nothing but 0 to 1. So I could reuse it here as well. And then finally on my yellow rect, I'm just going to use the same, and I just want the width to change. So I'm just using the same value here. The couple of other more factors, similarly for the circle here, I'm giving a blue circle. Now if you look at the green, this also has to, so on the height section I'm giving the values. There you go. So whatever animated fraction values that we receive from our animation tween values here, we are passing it into our canvas draw line, draw rect, these functions, so that it looks animated. Now let's build this and see how it looks. Alright, so I've built it, and let's give a quick restart and see how it looks. So there you go, you could see the lines being drawn, the circles animated, and all the shapes animated here. So this is how you achieve animation on your custom paint. And as I mentioned, I have separated, if you look at the first file, I have checked for the orientation, and depending on that I have routed to a different file. And if you look at the animator, here only the animation part has been covered, and it builds your custom paint. So I have given the fraction value for individual icons here, and then I've passed those fraction values to my custom paint. And then in my custom paint I have tried the paint object, and I have drawn the line, the rectangular, the circle, different shapes, and I've passed those fraction values inside it so that it looks animated when you build this. So this is how you use CustomPaint widget in your Flutter application and also add animations to it. So hope you like this video. If you do like, please give it a like and do subscribe. If you find this informative, please do share it. Thank you.